Hello, U.S. history students. So today is the first of two lessons this week dealing with Reconstruction. And this is kind of the bridge lesson, okay? It's going to review the things that we talked about last week on the beginnings of Reconstruction and foreshadow where we're headed with the last lesson for this week on the collapse of Reconstruction. So as we go through today's lesson, there are a couple things I just want to point out. I want to point out some key people, some key vocab. We're going to review the beginnings, like I said. We're going to review the amendments, like I said, and we're going to foreshadow where we're headed with the end of Reconstruction. Okay. So now with people, there are three people I want to introduce today or I want to review today. Number one is Vice President Andrew Johnson, who becomes president when Lincoln is assassinated and dies. Okay. Johnson's going to become the 17th president of the United States. He wants to follow Lincoln's plan for Reconstruction, but instead he is going to be dealing with Congress and especially Congress's efforts to impeach him. All right. So that is going to overshadow his plan for Reconstruction and his desire to implement Lincoln's plan. In fact, that's going to lead us to our second group, those radical Republicans. Those radical Republicans are the group that is dominating Congress. Remember, they wanted two things. They wanted to destroy former slaveholders in the South, and they want to give African Americans full rights, including the right to vote. Nothing wrong with that, okay? Nothing wrong with wanting to get rid of slavery. Although, remember, Lincoln wanted to bring back people easily so that we could move forward together as a country. If you set out to destroy those people, that's not going to help the healing process. All right. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to give the newly freed slaves more rights, including the right to vote. But the way they go about it is bad, okay, and is going to lead to major problems down the road. All right. These are the people that are responsible for impeaching Johnson. Okay, they say that he is abusing his power. He's basically firing some government officials they don't think he should fire. A lot of those officials are radical Republicans, so they impeach him. Okay, impeachment does not mean removal from office. Johnson comes the closest for getting kicked out of office. He misses it by one vote. So not only was he the first president to be impeached, he easily could have been the first president to get kicked out of office as well. Then the last person I want to mention is Ulysses S. Grant, okay, our Northern War hero. Remember, he wins the war for the North. General Lee surrenders to Grant at Appomattox. Grant is going to become the 18th president of the United States after Johnson. Okay, Johnson, not surprisingly, does not win re-election after his completion of Lincoln's second term in office. Grant will become the 18th president of the United States. He is a Republican. He will serve for 2 terms, and he will play a role in the end of Reconstruction. Okay, so we'll get to him more in a second, and more in the second lesson for this week. Okay, but Reconstruction very much going on under Grant's time in office. Now, in terms of vocab, number one is a sharecropper, okay? A sharecropper is anyone that farms a portion of land for a crop. And what they do is they share the crop with the owner of the land, okay? Now, this can apply to anybody, but in the years following the Civil War, you have a lot of former slaves coming back and working some of the land that they themselves worked as a slave, but they're working it for themselves, okay? And they will keep a portion of their crop, and then they will give a portion back to the landowner, okay? But that's what sharecropping is you farm land, you get a portion, and then you give a portion of it to the landowner himself. The Black Codes, or sometimes they're called the Jim Crow laws. Now, we use the term Black Code and Jim Crow laws interchangeably, but they basically kept blacks from being equal, okay? These are very, very early segregationist laws, very, very early discrimination laws. We're going to talk more about them when we get to the end of Reconstruction. But the South, who has become very, very embittered and are getting tired of some of the Reconstruction policies of the radical Republicans. Once Reconstruction is over, they're going to bring back the Black Codes, which is going to bring back segregation and discrimination and racism in the South. Right? But it's laws that keep blacks from being equal. Then you got two interesting groups of people. You have scallywags. Okay, scallywags were white Southerners. They were white people from the South, but they were against secession, and they really try to work with the new Union government during Reconstruction. Okay, so in a way, they are seen as traitors, not only because they didn't support secession, but now they seem to be supporting the radical Republicans and the Reconstructionist government that is taking advantage of Southerners. Okay, so they're kind of seen as traitors by the South. They are white Southerners who were against secession and seem to be trying to help out with Reconstruction. Then you have carpetbaggers. Carpetbaggers are from the North. They are white people from the North. Remember, we talked about these a little bit last week. These guys come south. They are called carpetbaggers because they carry suitcases, they carry luggage that are basically made out of very colorful pieces of carpet. They are easy to transport. And the reason that is because carpetbaggers are often on the move because they are involved in fraud and bribery. Okay, and they are sometimes running from their lives from angry mobs. All right, so scallywags, white Southerners; carpetbaggers, white Northerners. Scallywags against secession seem to be supporting Reconstruction. Carpetbaggers from the North, they're involved in fraud and bribery. Okay, they're taking advantage of the South, and remember, the South is already in a difficult position because the economy is crumbling. They are seen as backwards, very, very defeatist, very, very demoralized, and these carpetbaggers are taking advantage of that. Now, the beginnings, we've talked about the beginnings of Reconstruction last week, okay? You had those three plans: Lincoln's plan, Johnson's plan, the radical Republicans. Lincoln gets assassinated, his plan doesn't get implemented. Johnson, who wanted to carry out Lincoln's plan, gets involved with the clashes with radical Republicans. Remember, they impeach Johnson, they overpower him, okay? And he's going to have to spend his presidency dealing with those impeachment charges, which means the radical Republicans in Congress are going to be the ones calling the shots with Reconstruction. They are going to push to give African Americans full citizenship and voting rights. There's nothing wrong with that. But what is wrong is they are doing it while putting the South under military occupation. And the two do not sit well together. And as I've been saying, that's just going to add to these defeatist feelings, these demoralized feelings that the South has. And when Reconstruction is over, they're going to take out some of their frustration on those African Americans and basically begin to take away those rights that radical Republicans had tried to give them in the first place. Okay, so that's the beginnings of Reconstruction. Lincoln's plan is not going to be implemented. Johnson is not strong enough because he's dealing with impeachment. That means Congress and the radical Republicans are calling the shots. They've put the South under military occupation, which is not good. And on top of that, they're trying to force the South to accept citizenship and voting rights for African Americans. Okay. Now, the three amendments, all right, we've talked about these. Again, very logical approach to these three amendments. We're dealing with African Americans. The 13th Amendment is going to end slavery. It's going to abolish slavery everywhere in the United States. Okay. You've got to abolish slavery before you can talk about the next two amendments. Okay. So 13th, 14th, and 15th amendments are what we're talking about here. They go in a logical progression. 13th, abolish slavery. You've got to abolish slavery first before we can get to the 14th Amendment. Okay, the 14th Amendment is now going to give those newly freed slaves citizenship. Okay, it gives all African Americans, all people that are considered citizens of the United States, full rights as citizens. Okay, so 13th Amendment, abolish the slavery. 14th Amendment, we're going to take those newly freed slaves, we're going to give them citizenship. And then 15th Amendment is a specific portion of those citizenship rights, and that is the right to vote. Okay. Now, I know it says gave African Americans, by the way, AA stands for African American, gave African Americans the right to vote. Remember, it's African American men the right to vote. No woman can vote at this point in time, white or black. Okay. So it's gave African American men the right to vote. But again, a natural progression with those three amendments. You've got to abolish slavery first. Then we can talk about rights. You're going to give everybody citizenship rights first, and then more specifically, the right to vote. Okay, so the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, very logical progression there in the rights that they grant to African Americans. Now, that's basically the review with maybe a couple of new pieces added into it. But all of this is going to lead to, in our second lesson, the end of Reconstruction. Reconstruction will officially end with the Compromise of 1877. The Compromise of 1877 is a direct result of the presidential election of 1876. In 1876, you had two candidates, the Republican Rutherford B. Hayes and the Democrat Samuel Tilden. Well, Hayes and Tilden were tied. The Republican Party has enjoyed a long time in the White House, okay? You had Lincoln, who was a Republican. Johnson was technically a Southern Democrat, but he was on the Republican ticket, so he's kind of a quasi-Republican. And then you had Grant, and Grant serves for 2 terms, and he's a Republican. The Republicans would like to keep the White House. So basically, what they agree to do, because there's a tie between the Republican Hayes and the Democrat Tilden, the Democrats, who are mostly Southern, agree to support Hayes as president. So the Republicans get to keep the White House if the Republicans agree to end Reconstruction. Okay, so that's the deal that is going to end Reconstruction. We're going to talk more about this in our second lesson. But you had this tie. The Democrats, who are backing Tilden, are willing to let Hayes, the Republican, be president if the Republicans agree to end Reconstruction. The Republicans want to keep the White House, so they agree to end Reconstruction. Okay. By this time, the Democratic Party has a strong foothold in the South. That's why the South, and the Democrats specifically, are looking forward to ending Reconstruction. So they agree to the deal. Okay. Hayes, the Republican, becomes president. The Republicans agree to end Reconstruction. Unfortunately, when that happens, and we've been foreshadowing this all along, the South is going to return to its old racist ways. Now, slavery is not coming back. Okay. But we see passages of the Black Codes and the Jim Crow laws, which are going to bring back segregation and discrimination in a way that has not been present before. And those social differences, those class differences, those racial differences that existed before the war are going to come back. All right. But again, we're going to talk more about this in the last lesson for the week. Okay, so a nice little review of Reconstruction from last week, a little foreshadowing of where we're headed the rest of this week. Look over this material, take some notes on this, fill in the chart that I've attached to Canvas, and then don't forget that little quiz. That is a good review before we head to our final lesson.